So happy Tuesday, happy holidays. I'm Kimberlyn with Life's Yoga, and this is story time. And the story that I want to share with you today is actually the story of where #BeginAgain came from. Good morning, good morning, good morning. It has been a couple of really rainy days here. And I know that for me, that can be a difficult time to get up in the morning. That can be a difficult time to begin again. #BeginAgain is, to be honest, it's so outside my comfort zone. I don't understand technology and social media, and yet I come to you here weekly, if not more, because I want to spread what I think is important information, important heart content. And that's permission. Permission to show up, permission to be you. It's also an invitation to be your best self, to have an inspired life. So the Begin Again hashtag started years ago, before I even knew what a hashtag was, before I even knew yoga. And it was really my mantra. It was a meditative permission place. After my bicycle accident in 2008, I was bedridden for over a year and slow recovery process between a brain trauma and a dislocated shoulder. And during that time, I had a very difficult relationship with language, with noise, with, well, everything. Everything was hard. Everything was challenging. Everything was not what it was supposed to be. Now, I came to Begin Again as a short kind of mantra for myself. After a bicycle accident in 2008, I landed in basically bed rest for over a year. I dislocated my left shoulder and had a severe brain trauma from a concussion and from an impact on the ground from falling off my bicycle. So for at least, my memory is really unclear. I have to look at pictures that my kids took, and those are kind of funny because my kids are 2, 5, and 8, and so sometimes you'll see the whole image, and sometimes you'll see just my nose or something. But so when I look at those pictures, I can get a better remembering of what that time was like for me. But essentially, my shoulder was bandaged for a good solid 4 to 5 months, in which case it didn't move. It was wrapped up to protect what was a recovering soft tissue of dislocation. And that would have been probably much more easily to heal if I hadn't also had the brain injury, the brain trauma. And so this overwhelm, this extended state of being in so much need, culminated in permission, a mantra to begin again. And ironically, it became a hashtag. I'm new to all this hashtagging and media technology stuff, but the Begin Again hashtag was really an invitation to remind myself, and then through my example, invite others to also give themselves permission to begin again. Whether it's a sunrise, whether it's a new day, a new month, a new year. Begin Again is an invitation to recognize that when we pause to breathe and recognize that my identity, my self-worth is not defined by what I accomplish. It's defined by who I am and how I choose to show up. The accident could have easily killed me, or perhaps worse, left me as a dependent, non-functioning mental person. And yet, I recognize the beauty of being alive. And so it made it difficult for me to complete sentences. It made it difficult for me to find words, and answer questions were particularly difficult. Like, I can remember sitting in the car and my husband asked me what I wanted to eat for dinner. And We were going out, so I could choose whatever restaurant I wanted to go to, and I could remember hearing his question and understanding each of the individual words, but not knowing how they fit together, in which case I didn't know how I was going to answer the question. So to compensate or to help, really it was a coping strategy more than it was that I knew that this would improve my mental functioning. But I taught myself, I started to knit. Fast forward now, in the recovery process, to help facilitate my mental acuity, my endurance, I started to knit. And I didn't have anyone to necessarily teach me to knit, so I had a book that I bought, and reading was very difficult. But because the instructions were bulleted, right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 steps, I was able to learn to knit. I'm not a professional knitter in any way. And in fact, that next Christmas, I spent the whole year basically making scarves because I could practice counting to 30 stitches across, and practice beginning again, because every time I made a mistake, I would have to unravel, pull out the knitting. And there were times where it felt like getting the project done was more important than counting 30 stitches accurately or even performing the stitches accurately. Knitting gave me something tangible that I could do with my hands, and so it also therapeutically retrained me on how to hold my shoulder from this rounded place. So it taught me to hold my shoulder back and my elbows in while I worked the knitting needles like this. Now that's not to say that I don't overdo it sometimes and throw my shoulder off, but that was part of the reason that I started to knit. The other was because I could make something, I could do something productive to contribute. I made a lot of scarves that year and gave them as Christmas gifts. But in practicing the most simplest basic stitch of just 30 stitches across and 30 stitches back, I practiced holding on to a thought long enough to finish what was essentially a knitted sentence. 30 stitches to make a sentence. See, in the rest of my life, I was having a hard time understanding words, let alone making my own sentences. When I would get to the end, I could see my progress, and then I would turn and go back the other way on my knitting. And eventually I had a long scarf. But there was a lot of times that I messed up the stitch. I either held the yarn wrong, or I scooped it wrong way, or I dropped a stitch, or somehow I added a stitch, which now, as I've been knitting for almost a dozen years, I still kind of wonder how I do that. Like, I feel like I'm paying attention. But that's the whole point, is that when we pay attention, really, it's an opportunity to execute a skill. But when we're learning a new skill, mistakes will be made because we don't have the depth of knowledge intuitively, inherently. So this became the opportunity to unravel the work that I had done, the stitches that I had made, to begin again. And I did this a lot. I unraveled probably as much as I knitted. And yet, because there was no deadline, because there was no additional objective, the process was the objective. I could do that and then learn how to apply that philosophy, that mantra, to things that I thought were my objective, but because of the space that beginning again, of starting over, gave me, I was able to step back from what I was doing and choose if that was in fact still the path I wanted to go down. Now, ironically, this also led me to a career change. It led me to a parenting style shift. It even led me to a different way of talking to myself. Some of you may not know this, but it's one of my favorite invitations to extend, not only to my family and my friends, but my students and my clients, but honestly to myself, first and foremost, is that I'm a difficult, challenging person. And I don't mean that to downgrade or to underappreciate who I am and what I do in the world, but really what I'm saying is that I push and I'm an achiever. I like to get things done. So when I get to a point where there is no step forward, at least not in the trajectory that I was running, beginning again is very difficult. So begin again is an invitation to all of us to consider whether or not we're doing because we've always done, or because we have so much invested in this particular relationship, project, job, whatever it might be, is that whether the investment is energy, time, money, or whatever else, if it no longer fits, it's time to begin again. Begin again by reframing what you expect, or begin again by bringing this to a close, setting this aside, and finding what does fill your heart. Beginning again feels like failure. Beginning again reminds me that I'm not enough. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not talented enough. I'm not abundantly wealthy enough. Having to say no, having to admit defeat is the first step of beginning again. But beginning again is really more important that we recognize that the path that has halted, has been interrupted, probably wasn't really our path. Probably at one point served us to learn some things, but continuing down that trajectory isn't the way to where we're going, to who we are being. So when I can remember that in that pause, then I'm willing to let go of what I thought I was supposed to be doing. When I remembered in that pause that I was doing this to practice thinking, practice counting. I wasn't teaching myself to knit. I wasn't knitting scarves to make the most beautiful scarves in the world. Now, this is, kind of an inconsequential story, but it translates to so much more of what we do, what I do in my life. And that is that who I am and how I show up has to be the greatest gift. My attention to others has to be the greatest and most valuable gift. And so if what I'm doing causes me to dampen or subdue or change who I am, to me that's not worth it. Now, I'm not talking about the change of growth, or the change of transformation or maturation. I'm talking about putting on a mask of being someone who I am not. And the holiday season can be a lot of that. Going to holiday parties, or even sometimes coming home to a home that no longer fits who you've become. So I want to invite all of us, myself included, to begin again. To don't be afraid to unravel what you have stitched, how many miles, how much money, how much effort you've put into a particular project. If it doesn't bring you joy, if it doesn't help you show up in your best, most authentic self, it's not your work to do. Let it go. Reframe it, begin again, start over, however it is that you can find permission, because you are already enough, and just showing up is a gift. So I'm going to leave you now. Just showing up is a gift. I thank you for taking these moments to be with me. I've got a lot of work to do. Actually, I had to unravel about 3 days worth of knitting yesterday. I didn't have to, I chose to. because I found where I had dropped a stitch. And so I went back about, I don't know, maybe 20 rows or so. And I contemplated, it's where this podcast came from, is that, do I really want to start over? Who's ever going to notice that I missed that stitch? Or anyway, it's not about perfection, but it is about being honest with what shows up. Had I not seen the mistake, it would have been fine. But because I saw the mistake, because I saw where there was something that I could fix and I had the time and energy to do so, and there's no deadline. This project may never get finished. And that's not the case for everything in my life. But there are some things that I do just for the pure joy of being able to sit, meditate while I knit, meditate while I play my Legos. There's a little scene over here. Maybe I can spin the camera so you can see my little Christmas scene. Whoa! There's there's my microphone. Right? There is the little Lego scene by my teeny tiny tree. Anyway, these are the holiday meditation techniques. And every year I begin again on the Lego City, and every time that I can take a pause and see where I've lost my way, I begin again in being me. May you be you. Consider the end of this year, as we come to the close of 2019, what is it that you would like to let go of? What is it that's no longer serving you, so that you can welcome 2020 as an invitation to begin again? 2020 for clear vision, 2020 for abundance, 2020 for healing. May you begin again. Thank you for sharing this time with me. This has been Story Time. I will see you next Tuesday, Christmas Eve, for a short check-in, and I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, may you breathe deeply, move freely, labor lovingly, and live vibrantly. Namaste.